Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and this is a video that's been a long time coming. The thing about this is you may or may not recognize some of the quality of the picture of the cover here. I have done The Secret Garden and Little Lord Fauntleroy, this is a 3 volumes in one book, but I had been putting off A Little Princess because A Little Princess is my favorite. And the nice thing about putting off your favorites is that it means that you have them to look forward to when you get to that point in your, reading where you start saying, oh, what do I read this week? I don't know. I don't feel like reading this, and I've already read all of those, and I wasn't going to do that. So, on the one hand, it's been literally years and I hadn't gotten to this book, and on the other hand, I'm sad because I will no longer have this book to look forward to for this channel. Because I love A Little Princess. I don't think, objectively speaking, it's probably not as good a book as Secret Garden, because the thing about The Secret Garden is that Mary in The Secret Garden has a real character arc and character growth, that she's a spoiled brat at the start, and she learns the importance of being nice to people and, grows as a person and helps Colin grow as a person and so on and so forth. There's a lot that, as a person she grows and changes, and her intervention brings about good things. In A Little Princess, Sara's intervention brings about good things for people, but Sara, she doesn't so much have a character arc as she starts out really, really nice and goes through it and comes out at the other end managing to have been unchanged but for a deeper understanding of something that she kind of already understood. So, but that's not why I love her. It sort of is, but it sort of isn't. So let's take a look at A Little Princess being the whole story of Sara Crewe. This is, of course, a picture that is an illustration that is sort of from the middle of the events of the book. So Sara Crewe, at the start of this book, is 7 years old. And she is brought to, and she was born in India. Her mother died when she was a baby, and her father has had her until she turned 7, and has now brought her to England because in the 1800s, during the time that the British Empire included India, there was a lot of concern about children getting cholera and diphtheria and whatever else that they could wind up catching in India. And so it's outright stated at the start of the book that her father is sending her to a boarding school in England because effectively the concern is that you want your children sent to England, which is safer disease-wise than India. And so she is sent to a boarding school, and Miss Minchin is, looking at this, of course, with more adult eyes, you can understand Miss Minchin. She is a single woman running a business in the 1800s. She has no real legal rights, and she has to deal with all of these spoiled parents of spoiled children who insist that their little darlings are geniuses, and she puts up with all of this and has to put up with it with a smile. And so what little power she has is the power that she has over the servants, over her sister Amelia, and over the students in her care. And so she exercises it with an iron fist, but can't afford to do that with Sara, because Sara's father is so very, very rich, and Sara is so very, very clever, and smart, and good, and a whole bunch of other things that she can't. But Miss Minchin wants to, because She wants to exercise her power, and again, if you're sympathetic to her at all, you can see that it's probably somebody who wants to have some sort of ability to control things around her, and society doesn't allow it. On the other hand, this is a woman who is exerting an iron fist of control over school children because she can. And one of the first scenes that she has with Sara is when Sara arrives in the schoolroom for her very first class. Miss Minchin plonks her down and says, well, your father wanted you to take French. And Sara attempts to explain that her father wanted her to be doing French because her mother was French and she grew up speaking French and is entirely fluent and literate in French, and that it was about maintenance, one would suppose, instead of learning French. But Miss Minchin, who wants to exercise her power, determines on her own that Sara is being recalcitrant and doesn't want to learn French. And when the French teacher shows up, Sara very prettily explains in French to him that her mother was French, that she had grown up speaking French, that Madame had not listened. And it's this moment, this turning point in their relationship, the relationship of the pair of them, where Miss Minchin, it says, and she began from that minute to feel rather a grudge against her show pupil. Because Sara is a show pupil. She is rich and has all the prettiest dresses, so you always want her at the head of the line when you're taking the children to church, when you're taking the girls to church. And she's very, very smart, so she's always getting excellent grades, and she's a showpiece. And Miss Minchin puts up with it. Miss Minchin pastes a smile on her face and pets Sara muchly. And the thing is that the only thing that saves Sara is that Sara is, let's be honest, a bit of a Mary Sue. She is perfect. She is smart enough to know that she is not perfect. She, right at the start when Miss Minchin says, such a lovely child, Sara's first thought is, I am extremely unattractive. What is this woman talking about? And so on and so forth. It's that Sara's saving grace is that she is kind and generous and good and smart enough to see through Miss Minchin, thus meaning that she doesn't get spoiled only because of all of these factors. And then her father dies, losing his fortune, and Sara is rendered penniless, and in that moment Miss Minchin just goes after her with everything she has. You know, Miss Minchin has, unfortunately, just spent an absolute fortune on a whole bunch of things for Sara, and she is now deeply in debt, and I looked into this. This would be something like $30,000, $40,000 in current money in debt. You know, she's in debt a year's worth of wages from a, not extremely high-paying job, but pretty decently high, a solidly paying job, and she will not be paid back for any of it. And so when that happens, yes, one assumes she is selling all of those things back, probably at a loss, but nonetheless making back at least some of that money, and she decides to make Sara into an unpaid skivvy, into an unpaid teacher, that Sara is now teaching all of the children, is now teaching all of the little ones in the school their French classes, their math classes. She's doing the work of a scullery maid, she is doing the work of an errand girl, and because she is better educated than most errand boys and most scullery maids, she can also be entrusted to do all kinds of errands. And so Miss Minchin just uses her and tries to use her up, tries to break her. And Sara clings to this one thing, and it is the thing that it makes the title of this book, and it is a thing that I feel like it rehabilitates the word princess more than anything else ever would. And that is that Sara has determined earlier in the book, when some of the girls, the mean girls, start calling her Princess Sara as a joke, as she's putting on airs thinks she's like a princess. Sara takes this and says, being a princess is noblesse oblige. Being a princess means scattering largesse to those who are poorer than you. It means taking care to help those who have less. It means being a good and generous benefactor. It means using your power for the benefit of others. And she has this image in her head of a princess who is never more a princess than when she is held captive in prison, and is nonetheless kind and gracious and polite, and will nonetheless give what she has to those with less than her. And she does this. She still takes care of little Lottie, who she had semi-adopted because Lottie was a spoiled brat who just needed somebody to take her in hand, and Sara managed to do it. And she does this with Ermengarde, who is a not very bright girl but a faithful friend, and continues to help Ermengarde with her schoolwork. And Becky, who is the scullery maid, I forgot to go through the pictures. Here's Sara and, her low point in the attic. And she helps Becky, the scullery maid, with however she can, even after she's in these terrible circumstances, and she clings on with this core of steel and using her imagination to basically imagine herself into a better situation, to sit there and do her best to imagine herself warmer. And it works to an extent because she's a storyteller and a thinker, but it is so hard, and she sticks with it. And one day, a gentleman, the so-called Indian gentleman, moves in next door, and he gets the idea to, after several interactions between his Hindu servant and Sara, possibly Sikh, I don't really know. Anyways, he gets the idea that he should help this one little girl next door, and so one night she wakes up and her entire room has been transformed. She has a warm coverlet, there's food waiting for her, and it happens at the lowest point, just like in a fairy tale, just like in Cinderella when her fairy godmother shows up right before Cinderella gives up completely. And that moment, after all of these heartbreaking things, all of these soul-crushing things have happened to her, it happens just in the nick of time to rescue, to keep her from giving up. And this is a story of sort of a last-ditch rescue, but it's also a story about this girl who just is so strong. And you have this moment when Miss Minchin catches her laughing about something and says, "You will beg my pardon, what were you doing?" And Sara tells her she was just thinking, and Miss Minchin says, "You were thinking? What were you thinking? How dare you think? You will beg my pardon immediately." And Sara's response is, "I will beg your pardon for laughing if it was rude, but I will not beg your pardon for thinking." And this book is full of these moments of her just, doubling down on who she is and on what she believes and what she thinks is right and knows is right, and it is just so very much my favorite book for every single one of those moments that she grits her teeth and says, "I'm going to do this, I'm going to keep doing this, I will stick with this, because if I am a princess, I have these obligations, I have these characteristics that I believe are important, and I am going to live up to this. I am going to live up to this image I have in my head of what it means." And I love it so much for that. I love this book so much for that. So I'm going to stop now because I could probably talk a lot more about this book, but I am running it to my self-appointed time limit. So that's everything, and I will see you all next week.